So let's review. We need to just refresh our memories of how to solve equations. So example 1 has 5 different problems that we would have to solve for x for. This is going to help us solve radical equations. So part A says 5x equals 20. Well, in order to solve for x, we have to divide each side by 5. So in this case, when we divide 5 by itself, it cancels out, and 20 divided by 5 is 4. Part B. B is addition, so x plus some number is going to give us 10. So in order for us to get x by itself, you'd subtract 7 from each side, and then get x is 3. C, a little different. We've got it equals a negative number instead of a positive number. We're still subtracting 5 from it, so we need to add 5 to each side of our equation. And then negative 2 plus 5 is positive 3. Always watching your signs. Part D has 2 steps to it. Your first step is going to be getting rid of that positive 4. So we're going to subtract 4 from each side. You're going to get 3x equals 33. From there, we're going to then divide, so that way we get our x by itself. The 3's cancel out on the left-hand side, so you have x equals 11. Last but not least, we have x squared equals 81. In order to get rid of the squared, we have to take the square root of each side. So just remember, opposite of the square root is square, and opposite of taking it and raising it to the second power is the square root. So in this case, we're going to have 9 as our answer. But we're actually going to have 2 answers. We're going to have one that's positive and one that's negative. Because remember, if we take a positive number and square it, it's going to equal a positive answer. But if you take a negative number and also raise it to the second power, it's also going to be positive. So that's why we have 2 answers. So let's move on. Example 2. So very simply, we have to figure out what answer x is going to be. So the square root of something equals 4. The easy way to get rid of that square root is just to square both sides. So whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. So that's going to give us an answer of x on the left-hand side, because the check mark and the raising to the power 2 is going to cancel each other out. Then we're going to just take 4 and square it, which is 16. Okay. Example 3, we've got 2 different equations. Again, same lines as what we did in example 2. We're just going to square each side, so that way we get rid of the square root. So in this case, we have x plus 2. And then that equals 25. So it doesn't change anything inside of your square root, it just makes it go away by squaring it. And then 25 comes from 5 squared. When we look back at our problem rewritten, we have one more step to do, which is subtracting 2. So x in this case equals 23. Next one. A little different this time, just because we have a square root on both sides. So we have to square it because we want to get x by itself. So now you've got 2 square roots of 3 squared. When we write that out, what we have is we're writing 2 square roots of 3 twice. Okay? So what we have to do is take 2 and 2 and multiply it to get 4. And then we have the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. When you have 2 square roots being multiplied together, you just take the numbers inside and multiply them. So we would take 3 and 3 and multiply it to get 9. You then take your 9 and say, well, what's the square root of 9? We'd say 3. So now we have 4 times 3. So your answer is going to be 12. So that's the one thing that we have to work on and make sure that we know how to do, and we'll continue working on that skill. Last one. There will be times when you have a square root and then you're adding something to it. You treat the square root like it's parentheses, so we need to isolate it. So your first step is going to be subtracting 8 before you even square anything. So now we just subtract 8 from 15 and you get 7. So from here, your next instinct would be to make sure we get rid of that square root. So we're going to square both sides. That becomes x minus 3 equals 49. Your last step will end up being to add 3 to both sides, so x is 51. So that is the last of my examples for this lesson, and we'll do some more practice together the next time we talk.